Hello guys, welcome back to part 2 of the tier list. If you haven't checked out part 1 already, make sure to check it out before going into this video. Now without further ado, let's hop right back into the tier list.
Sandy's is an automatic A tier. I feel like because the charge rate is so fast, and on top of Sandy's fast charge rate, the hypercharge allowing you to get that much speed is just unhinged, bro. Like you can go quick, like if you place it in the right place at the right time, like for instance, start of a Brawl map, for example, your team gets so much pressure and aggression on the enemy comp that if let's say your enemy team has like a Maisie, for example, and the Maisie just goes in and supers in. There's nothing they can really do about it because she's so fast. The super will come out instantaneously because the Sandy super makes them invisible, so you just can't do anything about it. And it just allows for so many aggressive plays. And the chemistry with the aggro brawler is just A tier automatically. It's just so good. Next we have Maisie. Maisie's hypercharge rate is really good. The supercharge rate got nerfed a while back, making her D tier, but the damage buff she got with that stacking with the hypercharge, I feel like it has to get her to at A tier at least, because Maisie, the amount of damage and super cycles you can get with the Maisie hypercharge is just absolutely crazy. And I pushed with the Maisie for my Pro Prestige, and I can tell for a fact that Maisie gets her hypercharge a lot into tanks, and that with her hypercharge just absolutely deletes the entire enemy team. There's nothing that you can do about it. Next we have Poco. Poco's hypercharge is actually really good because the charge rate is really underrated. I feel like with the right comp, like any tank with Poco, they're completely screwed. Like in hot zone, if you have a Frank or in a Poco, you just know it's unwinnable unless you have like a highly DPS focused comp. And they can get really hard to get tank and Poco off the map, especially with the hypercharge. So with that, Poco stays alive a lot longer, allowing him to get a lot more supers to heal up. And the hypercharge just gives, essentially it's like if you have a Frank on your team with Sponge with around 14,000 HP, the Poco heal with the shield gives him an extra 4,000, which is 19,000 HP on top of the 14.7 thousand of Frank plus the 4.2. It's almost, that's just insane. It's like unkillable practically. So I feel like Poco's hypercharge with the right brawlers would just be absolutely broken. So I'm just gonna leave it names here. Edgar's hypercharge is the only thing that's keeping him relative at all. Like without his hypercharge, he would still be like below F tier. He'd be worse than Doug at this rate, at that rate. So I'm just gonna, with his hypercharge, even though it's not that great, I feel like his hypercharge is still pretty decent. A charge rate 2.5 supers is pretty good. If you just recycle your supers effectively, you can get his hypercharge pretty easily. And the fact that they reworked his hypercharge so it doesn't work on gadgets, but in turn they reduce the supercharge rate, I feel like took him out a little bit. But you can get it really easily knockout if you just camp in the bushes. You can get it after one round since it passively charges. So I'd leave him in B tier, considering his usage in knockout and Brawl would be really well. Shelly, honestly, Shelly's is kind of useless. I'm gonna put her a little bit above Crow and below Fang, mainly because the extra widening the cone doesn't really do much. It's just extra propeller for her damage, which is damage and speed, which is really good considering it allows her to just completely wipe the enemy team with shell shocks and clay pigeon. There's nothing the enemy team can do if they're within a 5 tile or 7 tile radius of Shelly. There's nothing they can do because the speed allows them to catch up. The wall break from the super allows them to get them behind walls and pretty much deletes a lot of brawlers. But the charge rate of 3.3 supers and the fact that the super doesn't really do anything for Shelly. It's just there's no unique part of the super that the normal super just wouldn't do. It's only useful for the stats. I'm gonna put it in C tier. Next we have Primo. Primo's hypercharge is really good considering the shield buff he gets and the speed buff he gets in order to close the distance. But other than that, I feel like his normal super is actually better, considering that even though it knocks him away, it knocks him into a way where you can just run forward and get more pressure for your team. But the Hypercharge allows you, if you hit two or more opponents and one goes forward and one goes backwards normally, they'd come to the middle, and that would allow for a lot more team wipes from the Primo end. So that's actually pretty good, but in all honesty, I'm going to put him in low P tier now that I think about it. Low P tier feels good for Primo, but it still takes 3.3 supers to take, even though he's gonna die a lot and get his super, but every time he gets a kill the super and just recharges, he's gonna charge it relatively quickly. It's a nice addition, but doesn't really help him that great. And also, considering Primo isn't that great in the meta, I'm gonna put his Hypercharge in the low B tier. Doesn't really, takes a little bit long to charge, and yeah. Next we have Squeak. Squeak's Hypercharge is pretty good for the stats, and the extra bombs from the secondary super is really good. The charge rate is okay, I guess, but mainly I'm just gonna put Squeak in the B tier. It's just pretty mid in general. There's nothing really much to say about it. Sprouts is also gonna go in D tier. The only reason you use Sprouts Hypercharge is for the extra damage, allowing you to two-shot many snipers. With the Hypercharge and Knockout, you can just 2 quick bombs and they're dead. So it still is okay, but the supercharged wall is useless. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really help the cause in any way, considering that it's like 500 damage buff the only time you use it in heist, and that's one of Sprout's most useless modes, unless you have like a crazy last pick. But Sprout's hyper in general is just not that good. Now we have Rosa. Rosa's Hypercharge is incredibly fast, and it slows the enemies down so the Rosa can get extra damage on top of them. So honestly, I'm gonna put her in probably high B tier, because her Hypercharge charges quickly. It gives her a shield that, even though she doesn't really need, is helpful, considering that even on top of the 8% reduction, there's still another 20% reduction. And the speed she gets to closing the gaps is so good, along with the slow from her gadget. It's just like, it creates immense pressure, allows the team to push up with her. It's just so much for the enemy team to handle. And considering that her gadget change allowed her to get so many more bushes, allowing her to close in the gap and get her Hypercharge even quicker, I just feel like her Hypercharge is just really good right now. Even though her kit feels a little outdated, her Hypercharge is really good. Next I'm gonna put Daryl. Daryl is a special case. His Hypercharge literally does nothing in the entire game, but the stat buffs he gets from his Hypercharge, and the fact that it's really easy to charge on maps like on Knockout, for example, I'm gonna put him in low C tier. Even though his Hypercharge doesn't do anything, it just like maybe sprays a little bit of barrels, just 600 damage. But the buffs you get, like the extra damage, the shield, and the speed, are all useful for Daryl. So I'm gonna put him in low C tier. And yeah, next we have 8-bit. It's absolutely useless. There's no reason to use it. You can't even use the stats very well. It's just that you get maybe a little bit of speed buff for like 5 seconds, which is okay, but it's not that great. Along with the fact that 8-bit's hyper just gives his turret an extra 1000 or 2000 HP with like a minigun that does 260 damage per bullet. Like seriously, 260. That's like more than half of Daryl's like spray of bullets of damage from the minigun. It's just like not good at all. And normally you'd even put it behind a wall, so it can't really do anything either. It's just normal super. It just gives an okay damage buff to 8-bit and a little bit of speed buff. Stu's hyper is going in the S tier. I mean, there shouldn't really be a debate about it. Like, the fact that Stu's hyper can just like change the entire tide of the game. If you get Stu's Hypercharge, there's just so much pressure on the enemy team that if you go up, for example, let's say in hot zones bring the fire, you just go up one of the sides, or even just heal in the mid in general. It just turns the tide of the game, and I feel like with the amount of pressure, you'll be able to stack it with other brawlers, like, and just turn the tide of the game in general. It's just like the healing, even though the healing got nerfed a little bit, but the healing is still absolutely crazy on Stu. And the fact that it only takes 12.5 ammo shots or 25%, I think it's 12.5 supers to get his Hypercharge. It's just, considering that I feel like it only takes, I think, 10 at full ammo shots. Like in a normal game, you get Stu's Hypercharge on hot zone at least once. It's really good for the time you use it. So S tier it is. Next we have Ruffs. So Ruffs Hypercharge gives another brawler of Hypercharge. It's good, but the charge rate, considering how often Ruffs gets his Hypercharge, it's not that good. Ruffs just isn't meta right now. It's just like only good on maps like Hard Rock Mine and stuff like that. I just feel like giving the Hypercharge alone is really good, considering like Ruffs could give a Hypercharge to like Leon or Mortis or like honestly anyone with a broken use case, and it's just good. But on those maps, I feel like Ruffs doesn't get his wouldn't charge his Hypercharge, even though his charge rate isn't that high. I think it's around 3 supers. But even when he does get his Hypercharge, you can't, or even if you have the damage boost from the shield that he gets from the original one, you cannot pick up his Hypercharge drop. I feel like, I don't know if that's a Supercell bug or if that's just like how it's supposed to work, but you have to be like a newly respawned person to get it. And I just feel like it's a good hyper, but the charge rate and some of the bugs just put him below. Next we have Otis. Otis is hyper C tier. Like, you get a damage buff, and I think that's about it. Damage speed up is it. Because the stun isn't really necessary. Like, you're already muting the opponent. There's no reason for an extra stun on top of the mute. It just feels redundant. And on top of that, it takes a while to charge up the super, so it's not like you use it consistently for the stats. So I'm just gonna leave Otis in C tier. Next, you have Penny. Before, Penny's Hypercharge was definitely S tier, but now that it got nerfed, I could see her being in mid to high A tier. It takes, I think, 3.3 supers to get her Hypercharge. I feel like Penny has fallen off just a little bit. I haven't seen a lot of Penny recently, but I feel like Penny in general, like, the Hypercharge chart is really good once you get it down, but now it just takes a little longer to get it. So I'm going to be leaving her in the A tier because the charge rate. Next we have Ash. Ash as a brawler is pretty good. Ash's Hypercharge is also really good. I'm going to put him like a little bit above Tara because if you pick Ash into the right draft, like let's say they're going single shot brawlers only, like let's say the enemy team has like an Angelo, a Cordelius, and Maisie, let's just like random comp, or any single shot comp, Ash's Hypercharge will be able to completely dominate that entire team. Like there's nothing they can do. It's just an immediately free win because they have nothing to do with the rats. You just have a 10,000 HP rage monster just running at you with a 10-second gadget and just completely steamrolling the entire enemy team. The DPS he gets from the Hypercharge is actually really good as well. So Hypercharge made him meta. I feel like A tier is good for him for his Hypercharge. Barry's Hypercharge is S tier. I don't even know why they didn't change his Hypercharge. It's still so quickly chargeable, and it's just like into any tank, it's just so broken. It's just like a better version of Pokemon, in my opinion. It's a thrower that his ice cream stays on the ground for 5 seconds. It only takes 2 supers. He gets a super from his allies, so it's just absolutely broken on broken on broken. The Hypercharge is so good, bro. I feel like it's probably one of the best Hypercharges in the game completely. It's like there's nothing else to say about Barry's Hypercharge. Next we have Melody's Hypercharge. So for Melody's Hypercharge, I'm gonna put Melody's Hypercharge at around probably the high A tier, probably because her Hypercharge allows you to make a lot of plays. It just takes a lot of skill to get used to because it takes a lot of time to get used to because of this. It's just a high skill cap brawler that in general, to get value out of her Hypercharge, you have to be really, really good with her and know exactly when to use it. The charge rate is pretty good. The damage is good. Like she was so broken before. I think she's still really good now. But I think that's just because her base kit, her Hypercharge is pretty okay. I put her above Penny in Hypercharge. So yeah, I'd say her Hypercharge is really good right now. Janet's, I mean, there's no discussion. Janet's got to be S tier, probably one of the best Hypercharge in the game. It only takes 2 supers. She wasn't touched in the last balance changes. I don't know why they didn't tweak her Hypercharge or anything. It's just absolutely broken. Like it just takes 12 hits, not even including if you hit any super bombs. It's like, considering that you can already get your super fast with Janet, the damage buff and the usability of this super, if you know how to use super well and not perform a summoning ritual on your enemies, you should be fine with Janet. So Janet S tier, absolutely deserved. And next we have Gray. So Gray's portals are really good on hot zone, really good for making aggro plays, really good on brawl hockey actually. I know brawl hockey is like a very niche mode that's gonna be leaving in like a month, but Gray's really good on all that stuff. The Hypercharge is really good on Gray in general. It's just like the usability of Gray went up because you can use 2 teleports now. Like on hot zone you can use 1 for your use, and you can leave the Hypercharge portal in your spawn to just continuously go in, and you can use 2 teleports to just completely change the game. So I'm gonna put him in B tier. It also doesn't take that long to charge up, but I feel like the only use of it would be in like hot zone, and the Hypercharge itself isn't that great. Like the extra 1000 shield is great and all, but like when you use it in knockout or like brawl ball would be okay. I feel like it's just a mediocre Hypercharge in general. It's only really good in hot zone, but the charge rate is beneficial for him. So I'm gonna put him in B tier. Eve's Hypercharge is really good. I mean, that's like one of the really real things that's keeping Eve in the meta, is that with her Hypercharge, it charges pretty okay, pretty quickly. 2.5 supers is really good for Eve. In knockout, it's really good. It essentially gives you free positioning in knockout. Like, they are not going to do anything with 3,000 HP Eve babies just going, like forcing them to spawn. There's like nothing they can really do about it unless they have like a Carl to like completely eviscerate or like something like that. But there's gonna be nothing they can really do about the Eve pets, and it's just like a free win on that knockout round. Next we have Bees. Bees, honestly, I think she's S tier, like bottom of S tier hyper, because the damage buff you get from B allowing you to do 5,000 per shot, one-shotting brawlers, just straight up one-shotting with the damage buff, and the damage gear on B is absolutely broken. Along with how you can spam gadgets to charge your super, along with the Hypercharge rate being like 2 to 2.3 supers, I'm pretty sure it's just absolutely crazy. I don't know why people aren't putting it in this tier, but I think Beast Hypercharge is definitely in the S tier. There's nothing really much else to say about Beast Hypercharge. Right now, I'm gonna leave the ones for speculation a bit, but Mr. Beast's Hypercharge is definitely S tier. I don't think there's really a discussion about it. That's the only thing making him relative in the meta right now. His Hypercharge is absolutely crazy. That, like, it's gotta be the most annoying thing to face when Mr. P gets his Hypercharge. I ban him out every single game. There's no reason I should ever be facing a Mr. P. It's just so annoying and broken, and allows you to get so much pressure that enemies can't even heal it because the portals go so damn fast. It's just unreal, bro. I feel like second best Hypercharge in the game, guaranteed. There's nothing you can really do about it. Alright, so Carl's Hypercharge got changed before it came to the game, and I feel like that single-handedly made his Hypercharge really good. It only takes 2 supers to get it. Now his Hypercharge fire is now similar to his gadget, where it does damage over time. And the fact that it charges quickly, I feel like middle of A tier, right above Tar will be. Actually, probably a little bit above Tar's Hypercharge is really good, in my opinion, like a good spot for him, because just it allows him to get so much pressure, but his weakness is still that it gets interrupted by any stun or pull or knockback or any like utility. It gets interrupted. That's the only downside to his super. Otherwise, his super would probably be like the most broken thing in the game. Next we have Hank. Honestly, Hank's is like one of the biggest wildcards in the game, because on other maps, like let's say parallel plays or like maps where there are like decent walls, like in places where you just can't use his Hypercharge, it feels like it would be like effectively an F tier. While on maps where it's open, like let's say if you get the Hypercharge at the right place on like Shooting Star with like a Byron healer or like overtime on Brawl Ball, it's definitely going to look broken considering the disparity. But the fact that he still heals and he gives a really needed speed and shield buff, I'm going to put him at high A tier, because it's not just the super that matters, but also the stats that matter on Hank. On top of the ability that he can get those team wipes just by clicking and spamming the yellow button, and the fact that it doesn't even take that long to charge, 2 to 2.5 supers, and he charges from the tank trait. Hank's Hypers is really good in my opinion, just A tier just automatically. Next we have Bo's Hypercharge. So I feel like it's similar to Jesse's Hypercharge in that good players know how to avoid the bow mines. The fact that you can put Bow's mines in 2 different places just it's just crazy to me. Like, you can completely shut down 2 different lanes to the point where they can only funnel in one, or they get smacked by a Mai. So I feel like Bo, I feel like people are underrating Bo's Hypercharge. I feel like Bo's Hypercharge has to be one of the better ones in the game as of right now. So I'm gonna leave him in mid A tier. Alright, and the last one that's in the game right now would be Mandy's. Mandy's Hypercharge, underrated, but I feel like definitely top 5 Hypercharge in the game. Like, the amount of supers you can get from the collaterals, like, even though you might not seem like it, but Mandy's, the other 2 supers that go in a V from Mandy's original super, like, gets so many unintended kills, and it just allows Mandy to cycle so many supers. It's just insane. It's super fun to play, high damage, not even that long to charge. See, 2.5 supers to charge. It's very easy to change supers after you get that Hypercharge, and the fact that the damage, like, up close, it insta kills any brawler up close, including a Frank. So it's just too crazy for me to think about. Like, the amount of times I just randomly get hit by a Mandy shot from out of left field is just insane. I just have to put it in the S tier. Alright, now these are all speculation. I do not know how great these Hypercharges actually do in the game. But let's go over the last 6 that have been leaked in the Brawl Talk. So, Sam's Hypercharge, I saw from Spen's video that it actually doesn't take that long to charge at all. And his super is like similar to Buzz's in that every single time he hits, instead of hitting a wall, if he hits an opponent, he charges it back. That's really, really good. I feel like I see people putting him in like a B or C tier. I feel like that's just absolutely broken. I feel like his Hypercharge is gonna be like the main thing that makes him meta. So I'm gonna put him in the A tier. High A tier with his Hypercharge. And yeah. And next we have Meg. Meg's only thing is that extra shield, extra speed. She didn't get the damage buff at all. If you got a damage buff with the Hypercharge, it'd be so good. But I just feel like that it's not that great. It's just more range. So I'm just gonna put her above Daryl in the C tier. Next we have Grom. I feel like Grom's supercharge rate isn't that much. I saw from C tier as well. And on top of that, Grom's Hypercharge in general just feels really good. So I'm gonna put Grom's Hyper just like probably in the middle of A tier, because the team wipe capabilities, the control you get in a hot zone, like you'll be able to make so many pop-up plays with Grom that it'll be insane to see. Next you have Lola. So Lola's Hypercharge in general doesn't really add much, but Lola's Hyper being 3.8 supers to get 1 ego that has 1,000 extra HP and a mediocre damage buff just feels so bad. Like, I'm gonna put her like probably below Chrono, honestly, because like the super, her kit is really good, and the fact that they made such a lackluster Hypercharge just doesn't feel right. It's just like not normal. Like, I feel like it's gonna get buffed later, and after that buff, I feel like it's just gonna be a lot better. If they buff like the supercharge rate, it'll be a lot better, but considering that supercharge rate isn't that great, I'm gonna put it in middle C tier. Next we have Buster. So Buster is the Hypercharge being 360. I don't feel like provides a lot to his kit, but the stat buffs he gets are really good. So I'm gonna put him probably high D tier, because even the 360 shield is literally nothing. Like, I can use a normal shield and then pop his Hypercharge after for the damage buff. Like, that's it. There's no reason you should really ever be using Buster's Hypercharge super. It just feels useless. There's like no reason, unless you're getting shot by 3 sides, then maybe you can pop the Hypercharge, but I feel like that's still that some predictors can still go through Buster's Hypercharge. And that, not through, but over Buster's Hypercharge, and the fact that it doesn't really provide much in a real 1v1 knockout game. For example, like we're using Buster most, just isn't that great. And last but not least, we have Chester. Chester's Hypercharge charges relatively quickly. Super fun. From what I've seen, it feels like just a super fun Hypercharge to use, and I feel like it'll catapult him back into the meta. I'm gonna be putting him above Jackie in this area, in this Hypercharge ranking. So I feel like Chester's Hypercharge, it just charges fast. The bomb, the slow, and then the spritz from I think only 2.5 supers is absolutely diabolical. Like, doing that is like, you're just gonna be annoying everyone the entire game, and I feel like that's just perfect for Chester's kit. It rounds it out, brings it back to the center, full circle pretty much. And yeah, I feel like that's my Hypercharge ranking. That's going to be my Hypercharge ranking, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.